Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I'm Mikey Edwards, and I'm going to be talking about political polarization surrounding New York City Democratic mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. This has made quite the buzz in the news lately, as he is a Democratic socialist who recently, as an underdog, beat the incumbent, uh, Andrew Cuomo, in the Democratic primary for the New York City mayoral race. So I'm really excited to talk about it today, and I hope you are too. So, first of all, what is the role of the media in a democratic society, and how does this relate to Zoran Mamdani? Well, I, as many others, feel that the primary purpose of the media is to inform citizens so that they can better participate in democracy and just be better informed. The nice thing about democracy is that all votes are equal, and that obviously promotes equality, gives power to the people. However, if you are an uninformed citizen, your vote has the same weight as an informed citizen's vote, and so that can create a problem if more of the citizenry is uninformed. And I also think it's important for the media to act as a watchdog against powerful individuals and organizations. Speak truth to power. And one thing I also liked from chapter 2 of our textbook, our class textbook regarding the news, was how they talked about it as a public good. And now, page 56 of the textbook defined a public good as something that everyone benefits from, regardless of how it is produced or consumed. And then regarding news, uh, the textbook stated, quote, if people are broadly knowledgeable enough to make decisions that benefit society, this is a good thing for everyone. I fully agree with that statement. And that's why I think it's so important that we learn about Zoran Mamdani, because there's been a lot of controversy. There's been Democrats that are angry at him. There's been a lot of Republicans and conservatives that are making a big fuss about his election in New York City. However, the fact that an underdog who doesn't have too much political experience was able to win a Democratic primary means that people want change. And I think it's important to see what kinds of change they want and what kind of change Zoran Mamdani is offering. So today I chose three online news articles, one from Fox Business, one from the New York Times, and one from NBC News. So let's dive into them. First, the Fox Business article. It was a focus on Mamdani's socialist values. The Fox Business article was titled Socialist-Leaning Candidates Gain Ground in U.S. Cities as Business Backlash Grows. Now, this is a 2-day old article, so it is fresh off the press. It is still very relevant, and it has some quotes from certain businessmen, businesswomen as well, and it speaks about the primaries in New York City and Minneapolis. And I think it was actually a pretty good source. I was expecting a Fox Business article to be a little more biased, especially because the headline kind of leaned towards how there's backlash to socialist leaning candidates. But in all reality, it basically described what Zoran Mamdani's platform is. First and foremost, it just stated it without any commentary. And so, like for example, it said that he's called for higher taxes on corporations in New York City and an extra 2% flat tax on the wealthiest 1% of New Yorkers, which we know there's a lot of wealth in New York, and also wants to raise the minimum wage and permanently eliminate fares on all city buses and implement free childcare for every New Yorker aged 6 weeks to 5 years. So some pretty big changes. Obviously, it would take a lot of work and a lot of money to make it happen. However, this article simply stated it, stated the facts, stated his positions, also stated the positions of a Minnesota state senator who's also in a primary currently. And I thought it was good. I thought it just stated the facts. It also gave both sides. It mentioned how certain business owners are planning on potentially leaving New York City if Zoran Mamdani is elected because they don't want their business to be taxed extra. But it simply stated what both sides were saying. It gave quotes from Zoran Mamdani himself, which added to the credibility of the article. And only at the very end did I sense a little bit of partisan, um, I guess, activity when it said that the San Francisco Bay Area has also struggled with the loss of businesses amid years of progressive governance leading to high costs of living. So I think there was a little jab at progressive leadership there at the end of the article, but overall, it stayed fairly unbiased and it gave both sides. It talked about what business owners are planning to do in response to this, and it also mentioned just Zoran Mamdani's platform, which I appreciated. The next article was by the New York Times, and it was defending Mamdani from Republican ire. So the title of this article was New York Republicans Unite in Attacking Mamdani. This article is also 2 days old, very relevant, and it just mentioned all the arguments that a lot of Republicans, especially congressmen, congresswomen, and senators, excuse me, have against Zohran Mamdani. And there's one quote from a Mr. Lawler who stated, Zohran Mamdani's push for government-owned grocery stores is straight out of the Marxist playbook. And this is a representative, a Republican representative, and it's clearly talking about how Republicans don't like the fact that he's a democratic socialist and that he's a communist, basically, and his government-owned grocery stores are not going to be successful, is what's implied there. Um, One interesting thing is that even though he is a democratic socialist and not a full-blown communist, most of the arguments stated in this article are from Republicans basically calling him a communist. And now I'm no democratic socialist. I definitely disagree with a lot of things there. However, it's so interesting to learn about what people are saying is bad about him and noticing that most of it's not true. He's not a full-blown communist. He has a lot of things that are similar. However, a lot of these attacks seem to be hyperbole in this article. And I also like that this article has a bit from both sides. It defends it. It has a quote from Zohran Mamdani's spokesman for his campaign, saying it's no surprise that the same Republicans who just cut taxes for billionaires while pushing millions off of Medicaid and Medicare are attacking Zohran. So I thought the article was very well balanced. It was very well written. It gave me a good idea of why conservatives are very angry at Zohran Mamdani, while also showing their rebuttal to some of those attacks and showing why some of them are unfounded. However, it also showed that some of them are reasonable. Business owners will have to pay more, and that's something that's going to happen. Additionally, free childcare, free buses, the money's going to have to come from somewhere. So it was a very comprehensive article on some of the problems, as well as how some of the attacks are not very well founded. The final article, it was NBC News, and it was a counterpunch to anti-Mamdani conservatives. So this article was titled, Calls to Strip Zohran Mamdani's Citizenship Spark Alarm About Trump Weaponizing Denaturalization. So this article talks about how a lot of Republicans, including the president, have stated that they want to deport Zohran Mamdani, take away his citizenship, simply because he has views that are radical in their eyes. One quote from it was that past administrations, including Obama's, have sought to denaturalize U.S. citizens such as terrorists and Nazis. I can't say I disagree. But advocates worry Trump could target political opponents. So this article has a lot of quotes from Republicans talking about how they want to deport or denaturalize Zohran Mamdani, not because of any crime he's committed, but because he's a democratic socialist and they view that as un-American. One Republican congressman, they had a quote from them saying that he needs to be, all caps, deported. And that was posted on social media. And so it gives all these arguments. It talks about how the president also has claimed without evidence that Mamdani is an illegal immigrant. And I really like the way this article was set up. It wasn't biased. It was definitely countering what the president and the administration and conservatives are saying. However, it was countering them with facts and evidence. By that definition, it was very objective. For example, it said Trump himself has claimed that Mamdani is an illegal immigrant. However, without evidence. It's important to note there's no evidence. It's giving the argument against Mamdani, but it's also letting us know this argument hasn't been backed up by anything yet. There's no reason to believe that Zohran Mamdani is an illegal immigrant. It gives both sides. It mentions how there are legal experts that say that denaturalizing Zohran Mamdani over his political beliefs would be a slippery slope that would lead to some of our rights being taken away eventually. If anyone can get denaturalized and deported for any small act, for simply having a different political ideology, that's obviously a very dangerous precedent for America. And so I liked it. It talked about a lot of these false arguments and attacks against Zohran Mamdani, and it gave the reason why that's an immoral choice to call for his deportation, to call for his denaturalization. And like I said, I'm no democratic socialist, but I think that Zohran Mamdani is someone who's trying to change the status quo. and he's talking about these potential big changes, and that's scaring a lot of people. And most of the attacks that are against him aren't about what he's actually saying. It's false claims about him being an illegal immigrant. It's false claims about him being a communist. And so this article debunks many of those theories, and it does it in a way that I think is not partisan. Also, 2 days old, just like the other two articles, fresh off the press, very relevant. It's definitely framing Mamdani in a good light, because it's countering a lot of these claims against him. However, it doesn't necessarily make claims that he is the best candidate for the job. It simply defends a lot of these attacks that are against him and paints him as someone who wants to bring big change to New York City, which he for sure is. My final thoughts. I I really enjoyed reading all three of these articles. I didn't think that any of them were particularly partisan or biased, and that they all gave me a well-rounded view on the situation surrounding Zohran Mamdani. The Fox Business article taught me a lot about his platform and the things he wants to do. The New York Times article showed me what Zohran Mamdani is saying, he wants to change, his spokesperson is saying. Also, it showed me what the conservatives are worried about regarding Zohran Mamdani and what they shouldn't be worried about, because he's not a communist, so he's not going to be raising Soviet flags anytime soon in New York City. And I think that that article just very intelligently listed out some of the grievances and countered the ones that were silly, but also uh, didn't take away from the, problems that potentially could rise from Zohran Mamdani's public programs that he wants to make. And finally, I think the NBC News article was very important because it is un-American to talk about deporting someone simply because they believe something different than you. That's against our First Amendment rights, and I think it's important to speak truth to power. Even if the president is saying something, I think it's important to call them out on that if they're wrong. And in this case, I believe that it's wrong to talk about deporting someone for their beliefs and claiming that they're an illegal immigrant without any evidence. So those are the three sources that I read. I think that there's so much more to this topic, but even just these three sources, I learned so much, and I hope you learned a lot too. And thank you so much for your time tonight. I know this video ran a little long, but I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And here are my sources. If you want to read any of these articles, feel free. Here are the titles and links right here. And there's plenty of other articles following these if you want to be catching up on the latest regarding the Zohran Mamdani race for the New York City mayor. Thank you so much for your time again, and have a great rest of your night or day.